You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Hello, and welcome to season 6. It's so weird that we are this far from season 1 already. I can't believe it. This is such an accomplishment, and what a way to kick off 2025. I'm very excited.
Yes, I know. It's hard to believe. I keep writing season 5 in my notes, and I'm like, no, it's season 6. And I mean, I just can't even believe that like 2.5 years ago.
I can't believe we made this far. I know. We were just having that conversation with someone, and I was like, oh, you listen to the show? And I forget that people actually listen to this too. Some days I'm like, oh yeah, like people are listening to this actively as well out there. So appreciate if you've stuck with us this long and are continuing to hear us talk. So I'm very much excited for this season. We've got some really cool guests lined up. With that, Rachel, let's kick off with our sponsor. We're always so grateful that because of these people, we can still talk to you every day.
Yes. And what better week to kick off season 6 than National Burn Awareness Week. And as Amber just mentioned, we are so honored to have Buses by the Beach powering today's podcast. Buses by the Beach is a community of VW bus enthusiasts based in West Michigan. They come together to camp, host amazing events, and raise funds to support Phoenix Society. So mark your calendars for the 2025 bus benefit happening May 23rd through 26th in Tufin, Michigan. So be sure to save the date, especially if you're local. It's always a blast, the bus benefit. So mark your calendars and we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it off with today's guest. I'm very excited. So I'll let you introduce her.
Yes, so today we are welcoming on Danette Haag, who is an inspiring woman whose life is a testament to resilience, faith, and courage. Her expertise as a speaker, author, and mindset coach is rooted in her own powerful story of surviving a severe burn injury from a house explosion as a child, and her journey of healing both inside and out. Danette has been honored with the 2019 Woman of Courage Award in Colorado and proudly holds the prestigious title of Mrs. Colorado 2021. She's the first severely scarred woman to win a state beauty pageant title. She's the first, but hopes she's not the last. Her mission is clear: to inspire others to see their own incredible value by sharing all she has learned from walking with courage, healing her soul, and redefining her beauty. Danette is beauty from ashes and believes no one needs to get stuck behind any life scar.
Welcome, Danette.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, ladies, for having me on.
Well, I know it's always important to us to kind of give our listeners a little bit of an intro, but we also believe that it's important for the survivor themselves to tell a story in their own words. So to get us started today, can you tell us a little bit more about your injury and your journey as a survivor?
Wow. And isn't that a long journey, ladies? My burn injury happened when I was only 10 years old, and we were actually having a 4-H meeting at our house. So we had it was a full house, 27 people, a lot of young girls around my age, 10 to 13. And there had been an odorless and undetectable gas leak. My dad was actually standing at the furnace trying to get it to work when there was a slow gas leak. They didn't put the odor in, so no one had any idea there was a gas leak. And when my mom turned on the water to make coffee, the water heater that was on the other side of the basement from the gas leak ignited those fumes, and then it exploded through the house. My brother was severely burned. He was 8 at the time. My dad was severely burned, and I was the next worst. I was upstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table. It's like being in that one magic spot, like where the flames came out of the basement, engulfed me from behind, and the girls next to me had more critical injuries as well. So, I had injuries to almost 70% of my body and was in a coma, probably like a lot of the listeners can relate. And I was not expected to live. They had to do an emergency trach to save my life. And my dad almost died as well. So and then all the things that come after that. I think one of the most beautiful moments of that night, and to me, it's really important to find beauty in all the ashes. You need to find the things to hang on to that really were, that keep you going, some sort of gratitude. And that was, the night that I really heard my guardian angel's voice for the first time. And I had a very divine experience, first of many. So that was when I was introduced to my guardian angel, and that I'm grateful for. Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. And, I knew a little bit about your backstory, but didn't know, all the details of your burn injury. And, I shouldn't say how fitting, but it is so fitting that it is National Burn Awareness Week. And this year's theme is all about preventing burns in the homes. And, hearing stories like yours about an explosion, it's so, scary. And I hope this can help folks who are listening take those extra time to make sure, you have the fire safety prevention measures in your home, and, what better time to make sure you have a fire escape plan and things like that. So I just wanted to call that out, because it's crazy how quickly something like that can happen
Right.
at home.
Yeah.
So now, can you tell me too, so you were, I think your story is a little bit unique in the sense that you were not a lone burn survivor. Or I say lone, meaning like you were not necessarily a lone, but you were not the lone survivor that was part of this explosion, right? So it sounds like there were quite a few other survivors that were with you on this journey. Is that correct to say? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And there was all different levels of, burn injury from, but a burn is a burn is a burn. And it's all really hard. So we did have a great community. This happened in Eastern Iowa, a very rural community. I grew up on a farm, pig farm in the middle of nowhere. And, but that whole community came together in such a beautiful and a magnificent way, following it to support all of us. So yeah.
I was going to say, I'm sure it's a different experience when you go through it with someone or with a group of people. Do you think that it made you closer, or do you think there are elements of it that were particularly difficult?
I think the biggest part, and I think the thing that if we had a do-over, we would do over, is talking about it in a way that we had the freedom to talk about how hard it was, or, the hard parts to it. Logistics, we could talk about surgeries and, therapies and things like that. But even in our own home, we just didn't talk about it. It became this huge elephant in the room. There were some issues, like my dad had major guilt. No one else blamed him, but there was this underlying kind of idea of blame of who caused it. It's part of the grief process where you go through all of the things. And so there was that heaviness that I think was really hard. And growing up without, just a simple farm family, we really didn't have the resources. No, this was back in the early 80s. So like therapy or family therapy wasn't something that was even really a thing. So we just did our best to do our best. And so going back, there was a lot of lonely feelings. I felt alone quite a bit, even though I wasn't alone in the journey, because I didn't feel like I had the freedom to really talk about how hard it was. And then trying to figure out, navigate how to face the world with a body covered in scars, and not knowing the tools that work, to get past those hard moments.
I talk about it a lot, but I think like mental health in general, whether you were burned as a child, right, or just like growing up, like mental health was never something that we like, I don't want to say care about, but like, it wasn't as prominent as it is now. Like mental health is the appropriate way to handle, just your life in general, right? Like we go to the doctor for, physical health. We should also be going for mental health. But back then it wasn't, even when I was growing up, it wasn't a thing. And I think it's very important, right? You raise that, especially now, like in a world today where it is welcomed, and like, not just for, survivors of trauma, but it's an important part of your story and your life to continue to seek mental health. And so I don't think it's just your situation, right? I think I can relate to that too. It's like, we look at mental health very differently now, and hopefully, right. And in our stats of today, like when these things happen, we try to seek mental health as a secondary, right? Not just getting that physical recovery. So I think that's a really important element of, it's hard. Like we sweep things under the rug, and then eventually they become this like obvious, like you said, elephant in the room. And I'm sure that's a difficult thing, like for someone who hasn't been burned, to just have things sweep under the rug, but never mind that. Now you're like, you've got this gaping hole, right? Of like, we never talked about it. And especially because there's so many elements, your dad, you said your brother as well. That has to be tough. Do you talk about it today? Can I ask? Or did you talk?
And actually, me becoming a public speaker 7 years ago, almost 8 now, my dad has healed so much more because he's heard me speak, and I've kind of given him permission to heal all these decades later. So first of all, it's never too late to start healing.
I love that.
Never too late. And just to give each other the freedom and space just to talk about it. Mental health is more than just going to seek counseling. I mean, that can be super important, but it's really checking in and being honest and aware of where our thoughts are at. How are we, do we have a safe space to talk about our feelings and express them in a way just to get them out and talk through them? Or are we holding them all in? I think it's just that whole mental awareness, spiritual sense of who we are, that collective holistic healing. And we think it's so much of it, especially as a burn survivor, is physical, right? And that part seems like it takes an eternity. It's such a small process.
And it seems like it's the hardest at the time. Right.
And then we don't realize, then we start uncovering all these other scars, right? These other internal scars that we then have to figure out how to face. And so it becomes very daunting. A lot of things I talk about as a public speaker, an author, a coach, all the things I do is that scars are scars. And I think this is the part when I realized this, it helped me in my own healing to stand in who I was, to feel like I fit into the world, was everybody has scars of some kind. Everybody. We all know what pain feels like. And the cause of our scars are different. They look very different, but the healing is so much the same. And when I realized that, it gave me so much more power to do all the things that I wanted to do in life, whether that was go to college, to be a nurse, or to find myself enough to give myself permission to, be open enough to fall in love and get married and have children and those kind of things. Let alone speak on a stage and this shy little farm girl and wear a swimsuit on stage of all things. And so that it really started there. And when I started looking around, everyone is hurting from someone. And when you really start sharing your story, other people start sharing theirs. And then they can relate on some weird level, even if they've never had a burn injury. Our scars and our pain actually can unite us. And that was the one thing that got me to actually gave me permission to feel like I could be included in a state beauty pageant. I mean, I competed with 40 women from across Colorado. And this is the Mrs. America system. I always wanted to be on the Miss America stage when I was little. And I remember the moment that dream that was in me for as long as I can remember, when it shattered, because none of those ladies had scars. And I don't know about you, but when I watch TV and movies, all I see who have scars are the bad guys, right? And so I don't know if you ladies struggled with that, but I'm like, I'm not a bad person. I want to be beautiful, right? So I had to battle that, and I had to find a way that I fit in. And so once I started speaking to audiences about sharing my journey to how I found myself as beautiful again, that whole push to be in a beauty pageant like kept popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally kept pushing it away. That sounds super scary. I was in my late 40s. I'd be competing with women half my age. I'd had 4 kids. I had 4 miscarriages. My body had been through a lot. And I thought, I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to be on a stage of beauty, until I had I call it a vision. And it was me and 40 women on stage. And the really cool thing that happened to me in this moment is when I looked around at all those women that I saw standing with me, I didn't see me as the scarred lady in the middle. When I looked around, I saw their scars too. I saw their stories. I saw their pain. I saw their insecurities. I saw their fear, and I saw their triumph. And so that gave me courage, like, hey, I'm really not that much different than them.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 years after competing, I won the darn thing. But I had to get my mindset straight that I fit in not just into this daily world, but I fit into this idea of beauty. And it has just become life-changing for me to see myself and the world for what it is. Right? Is that our scars may be a symbol of where we've been, but we don't need to let them dictate where we're headed.
I love that.
To be defined by them.
I love that. So I want to go back a little bit. And I see a lot of, overlaps in your journey and along with mine. Because I was born when I was 3, and growing up, I was always watching like America's Next Top Model. And I wrote in my 5th grade yearbook that I wanted to be modeling. When I grow up, I wanted to be modeling my own fashions. And, my parents and my community really helped boost my confidence to know that if that's what I wanted to go do, my scars weren't holding me back. Granted, I'm not a model today. Thank goodness. I could not walk in heels or I could not do that anymore. But
yes, you could. I want to say yes, you could.
Maybe for like casual athletic wear, I can model. But so when you were talking about having that dream to be, Miss America, was that just something, did you try out for that? I don't know a ton about the pageants, or was that just kind of always something and you were thinking that, I have scars, so I can't achieve this?
Well, I probably could walk. I always love watching the Miss America. And when you have a dream or when you're made for something, you're just so drawn to it. Like you can't help but fall in love with the idea. And so ever since I could remember, every time the Miss America stage, or pageant was on TV, I was front and center and I was taking in it all. Like I was living on a pig farm. So I was as far away as you could get from a glamorous stage. And we didn't have the money. So for me to actually do that was far-fetched in a lot of ways. But about 2 years after my injury, so I would have been about 12-ish, I remember watching it again. And I'm sitting on the floor and that excitement came back up in me again to want to be a part of it. I got so excited. But then I looked down at my scars and literally I said to myself, that will never happen for me. And you know how then we allow those dreams to just shatter because you have no hope that will ever happen. And then so I just forgot about it. It was still laying there on my living room floor for decades, not even realizing how much I really wanted it. But my burn injury, and I think a lot of it took so long for me to rise above it, because I didn't really have the understanding or the permission to talk about it, to really work through it. I had to figure out the hard way how to do that, how to take care of myself, to nurture myself, to find myself again, to deal with the traumas and the triggers and all the things that go along with that. But I had to learn so much about myself and grow and accept and have awareness about what my scars were doing to me, what I was allowing them to do to me. Right. The hard thing about scars, as you all know, it's every time you get stared at, in that weird way when they show. It's like you're right back to the brokenness again. And it's so hard to keep picking yourself up when you experience that on the daily. And so I had to figure out ways to get past it. And that took me a long time.
Yeah. And I'm sure, from my journey, that's something I've also, I think we've all kind of had to get past that. And it's still something, I struggle with today. And, generally I do, and Amber and I have talked about this before, we think our society in general is getting better and, with beauty standards and, that self-love and confidence, but it's definitely not something that's easy, that gets, it's not a quick journey, and it's an ongoing forever journey, at least for me.
I think if we wait for society to get it, we're going to die waiting. Mm-hmm. I think the magic happens when we just do the work ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when I started showing up like with this authentic love and acceptance of who I am, and started seeing myself for what I really was, my gifts, my talents, understanding that I was still me, that I wasn't any less of a person, and that my journey with my injury actually had given me some deep life wisdom that was super valuable, built my character, gave me more compassion, taught me how to be resilient. And like, man, that's kind of cool.
It is cool.
Right? And what it teaches us, really what our pain is meant for, is to build us up into better human beings, to build our resilience, to hopefully deepen our faith walk, whatever that looks like for you. Like, it has all of these great outcomes that could make our life better if we choose that route. But the thing is, we have to see it for the good while we heal from the bad. Mm-hmm. And that all takes work.
I also think there's an element of like, I found it, and again, I hear your struggles, and I hear what Rachel shared as a child burn survivor, and you went through also like a very difficult time, right? Like, school was, even as a non-burn survivor, like that time in my life was a very difficult time for me, right, as a kid. And so add that, element of being a burn survivor to it, I'm sure that's difficult. I feel like now that I'm a confident adult, even before my burn injury, right, I was a confident adult. And so I think it gave me the tools, because I was in a different state of mind, right? Like, when I feel like you're a vulnerable child, I think there's an element of it's probably even that much harder to kind of get through those like societal norms and the things that we struggle with. I feel like I've been able to have a little bit more of an empowered journey as an adult, because I kind of have the tools that I need now to overcome some of that struggle, right? Like, I think having been burned as a child, I'm sure it's that much harder, right? Because I already had my own issues with like trying to find out who you are, not being burned. And so now that I think I'm an adult and I was burned, I personally think it was probably a little bit easier for me, knowing that I've been able to kind of overcome some of that on my own, with the tools that I had kind of learning growing up. And I think there's got to be an element of like, that's even that much more difficult that you guys had to kind of overcome when you're trying to figure out who you are, but then also still trying to deal with, right, that trauma associated with it as well. So I give you guys the credit, because I think I felt empowered to kind of just be who I was already. And then, okay, I was burned and there was a level of difficulty with that, but I was confident with who I was. Right. And if, adding a burn to that, okay, if you don't like it, okay. You know what I mean? It's different. I think it's a different element of your story when you've already become a confident adult versus like growing into who you really are, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. But after mentoring a lot of people, I want to challenge that. And though I think you, like you said, you had a lot of great skills and tools already. A lot of adults don't necessarily have those.
Oh, absolutely.
So, right. And I think it depends too, even children. It depends on your support system. It depends on your freedoms to be able, like me, I just felt like I couldn't talk about it.
Right.
And I think mine would have been a lot easier if I could, to a lot of different ways. And I think it depends on how much we actually internalize things and how much we sit on and we carry and because I mean, like, our own thoughts our own voice is the voice we hear the most during the day. We're either going to be our biggest critic or our biggest cheerleader. Right? It just kind of depends, right? And so I think age is I understand what you're saying about age, but I think it's even more how you're willing to look at it, how much work you're willing to do, the support system you have, and the freedoms you have, and the ability to be able to share that, right? So I commend you for having the awesome coping tools already, right? And not letting them go, realizing you still needed them. Because
and I struggled, right? Like no one's saying I didn't struggle with that, but I do think there's for me, it was like, yes, I had the tools that I needed, but I also, I wasn't in this very, like, growing up is a very vulnerable state, right? You're going through trying to figure out who you are. And I can only imagine, like, I was trying to figure out who I was as a kid and didn't have those injuries. So I can only imagine, you're trying to figure out who you are, but also having to go through this struggle of like, I have these scars and I feel like I'm looked at differently because of that. And I commend you guys for being able to go through something like that, because that is difficult, right? I know what I went through is difficult, but also growing up and I think I look at it differently now also that I'm a mom, right? Like you look at how precious like little life is, and you're like, oh wow, this is got to be difficult to look at even as a parent, right? Like of dealing with that.
For sure. Definitely. Yeah. It's, and it's even just, Danette, you were 10 when you were injured. And I was 3. And even, yes, we were children burn survivors, but even that age gap, I never knew who I was before my burn. You certainly did. So, it's at every age, at every point of life, you're going to have different unique challenges. But it's interesting, even though we were all burned at different ages and different times, we can all still relate to that. But I want to go back a little. I know, and I shared it in the intro, that you were awarded Mrs. Colorado in 2021, and that's so amazing. And I know you talked a little bit about, how you got to that point. But can you just kind of tell us, like, what does this title mean to you? And, how do you hope that you achieving this title influences, others, and especially just, the perceptions of beauty and resilience that we've already been talking about?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a program that I do for audiences, women, specifically for women, and it's called Flawless. And it's seeing yourself the way God sees you, whatever that is. And so many people struggle with that, right? Whether it's weight or age or insecurity or mistakes or whatever we get caught up in. And so I was giving this program all over the country, telling audiences of people that I saw myself as flawless and saw my beauty, saw myself as priceless. And when that idea popped up again and I pushed it away, I thought, well, I kind of felt like a fraud because I'm telling people I see myself as beautiful and I'm letting fear stop me. And so moving forward in that courage and then actually winning, one of my driving forces, first of all, was to fulfill that childhood dream, that inner little girl in me who had shattered that dream. I got to fulfill it for her. And it helped her feel whole in some way. But I also feel like it celebrates how far I've come in the woman that I am today. And not just in my scars of my burn injury, but also like in all the other scars of life, and a mom having 4 miscarriages. I've been through divorce, and I have a son with severe dyslexia, and we have those kind of challenges. Lost my mom to a 13-year battle of Parkinson's, and that was terrible. So like all the scars that I've been through and made it past and learn what they taught me, this title just helped validate that our beauty comes from within and how well we are able to heal ourselves and be content in the skin that we're in. And I hope that it sends a message to anyone who feels like they're not good enough, who they're not beautiful enough, or feel like they're broken. You don't have to be broken forever. So for me, it just validates everything. And so the first year I competed, I didn't place. I knew nothing about being a pageant. It's kind of a sport. There's certain things you got to know and do. But I had caught the bug. So I did it again and I got top 12. I was a semifinalist. And then the competitive girl in me, I'm a racer, I'm a runner. So I'm like, I got to do better. I got to do better. And so, yeah. And then I won. And I just thought the closest I could get to that crown, the more it would validate, right? My beauty. And it's highly competitive. And I ended up then getting to compete on the Mrs. America stage in Vegas as Mrs. Colorado, competing with women from all over our country. And that was like the moment of I made it to the stage. I did that. Right.
It's amazing. I
I'll let
know
you in
nothing.
on I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't tell a lot of folks this, but growing up, I competed in Miss Teen Rhode Island. So I do have super respect for it, because I know how hard it is and how difficult and how much time and financials and like all of the different things that go into it. And so I commend you for not just going once and quitting, like keep going at it, because it's very much a sport.
It is. Yeah.
And
I love that about you, Amber. That's really cool. This little secret came out. I love it.
I know. I normally it's not something I share. My husband will go out in the attic and pull out all of the photos he has of it. But yes, it was like a time in my life where I wanted to be, like Rachel said, America's Next Top Model. I went to modeling school. They taught you how to walk, all of the things. And I loved it. It was a fun time for me, and I felt empowered. And I think pageants sometimes get a bad rap, but I very much enjoyed my time, and you feel confident, and it helps you just enjoy. I think I very much enjoyed that time, but I know how much work goes into it and how
it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Physically, emotionally, there's a lot of I feel like there's also a lot of politics involved, right? When it comes to other women. And so it can be difficult when you get a bunch of women together to compete against one another.
Your headspace of comparing yourself, right, to everybody. And I think it tests your own will in who you are and how strong you are in yourself. But
yes,
one of the things that I won, that just before I was crowned the winner, I was in the top 6 and they were giving out other awards. And that year I won best in swimsuit too, which, as you know, in a swimsuit, you can't hide any scars. And I have them on my back, and I've got, I had the 30 or so skin grafts. I don't even know, you lose count after a while. And so my legs are all patchworked, right? And from those, and my arms and my chest and my neck and my face, and I have scars everywhere. But I won best in swimsuit. And it wasn't because I was the thinnest or the one with the most muscles, nothing like that. I attribute to the fact that I was the most confident in the skin I'm in. And to me, that journey was so worth it for so many reasons, because it doesn't, my scars don't stop me from anything anymore. And for a long time they did, even just going to the pool with my kids wearing a suit. I'm like, I don't want to embarrass them. And I don't want to get stared at, and can get in our heads about a lot of different things. But when we really focus and do the work and know what keeps our hearts and minds at peace with who we are, if we've done the work to have acceptance and awareness of our inner well-being, then all that shows. It showed in that swimsuit. It showed in my gown. And I have the crown and the awards to prove it. So
did you have any experiences? Because I know women can be mean, right? Did you have any experience with difficulties with it? Or did you feel that it was the opposite? The folks that were around you were welcoming and
I found my people. And we're still friends. A few of us are former queens. We call ourselves just all washed up queens now, but we get together and we have this great sisterhood here in Colorado of former queens, and it's fantastic. But I think with anything else, you just find your people, and anybody else that's not meant to be your people, you just let them be, let them do their thing. You can't be friends with everybody, but certainly I feel like those people were placed on my path for that support and love. And it was so much fun. Like you said, Amber, it's it's a really great experience.
I love that. Yeah, and we talk about that, whether it's with dating or friendships or whoever it may be, yeah, find your people, find the people who love and support you no matter what and uplift you. And I think all women, I mean, everyone in general, we all struggle with, that self-love and that confidence. So can you just share a little bit of, or even if you have any advice or tips for especially the women listening and maybe they're struggling with finding their self-love?
Oh, I think there was a moment that, I've been on this journey, right, of figuring out my own self-talk.
Mm.
And for a long time, when I would go out and someone would stare at me and I'd feel awkward, I'd want to shrink and I'd want to just go hide, right? I'm sure everybody can kind of understand that moment. But when it happens every single day, it gets exhausting and tiring. But my brain would always go to the worst. Like, oh, they think I'm gross. They don't want to talk to me. They're going to say something, and I would just always, my brain would go to the worst. It wasn't until I was like somewhere in my 30s where I'm like, they aren't saying a word, Danette. Like, you're filling in the blanks.
Mm.
So I took away that power and gave it to myself. And I started intentionally telling myself something else. Like, I'm actually having a really good hair day today. That's why she's staring at me, right? Or I love this blouse I'm wearing. Or when I'm out with my kids, like they're just looking at how much I love my kids and admiring my interaction. I mean, whatever you got to tell yourself to snap out of the negativity and to put on something that actually serves you so you can keep going. You can keep doing your job and just let them think whatever they want. Well, then it was probably a couple years before I won the title, and I'm doing more soul searching as I'm competing, and I figured out something else. I took that whole idea even deeper, and I started seeing my scars as God's masterpiece of art. So when you think of artwork, like a statue or a painting, and it's unique, you have to stop and stare at it, don't you? You have to stop and take it in. Like, you can't help it. So I see my scars as God's artwork that was created when I walked through fire. And it tells a story that is a little different for everyone who's having to receive it. They're learning something about themselves, because when I take that artwork and I combine it with me just staying in my joy, staying in my peace, smiling instead of getting reactive in a negative way, or getting nervous, or, for a long time I get angry. But when I can maintain my own inner self and just continue my shopping at Walmart or playing at the park or whatever I'm doing, it teaches them something more about themselves that they most likely need to learn. I don't need to know it. I don't need to know it. And the other thing I learned is when I stay in that place of confidence, that just calm, they're not going to say anything to me because I have the power in the whole situation. But when you start getting like defensive or reactive, that's when people get heightened, and that's when a bad situation can happen. So I just encourage everyone to see their scars as God's masterpiece of art. And as you're working on yourself, be that inspiration for other people to work on themselves too. And be proud of it. Like, I have this cool artwork that tells my story, and I don't have to say a dang thing. To me, that's kind of cool.
I think we talk about that a lot on this too, right? Like, we talk about how sometimes our perception, and I've mentioned this before, but I think sometimes our perception is to get on the defense and think that everyone is out to get us or is out to say something mean, when I do think, like, maybe, half the time, if not more, I think a lot of the time we're curious as humans to know, like, why something is different. And it happens a lot with kids, but I think it's the same with adults. Sometimes adults just don't know their manners, right? Of like what societal norms are. And so they're curious, right? And so if, I know we've had a lot of survivors say, like, they'll confront it head on, and sometimes it's not even what we think, right? I think we had someone on the show, Rachel, you probably remember who it was, where they were at the store and somebody was staring, and the comment wasn't at all that they were defensive about the scars. That person had a family member that was burned and was so surprised at how confident that person was. So I think sometimes what we think maybe the reason for staring sometimes isn't at all that at all. And I try to remind myself of that even when I see folks staring, because sometimes it's maybe like for me, if I'm staring sometimes, it's also because I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody who looks like me, right? And a lot of the time it's like you want to say something and you're not sure. So I do think that our perception, like we tell ourselves stories in our heads that just aren't always what they are. And so when I go out to the store and I'm in that situation, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, maybe this isn't what I think. No, grant me, don't get me wrong. There are folks out there to make some mean comments, and that some folks just can be that way. But I think I try to look at it from the lens of like, okay, maybe it's just not what I think in my head, right? Maybe it is something else, and trying to have that perspective. Sometimes that helps me as well.
So can we just have the expectation then to like, I'm just going to expect what everyone that is staring at me today has a good understanding or is thinking something positive. And then you just like expect that. And then you move on.
Yeah.
Then it's not a big deal. Then you don't have to wonder. You don't really have to know what's going on in their head. Just expect the best. Expect some compassion, maybe. Expect that they are coming from a place where they're trying to learn something from themselves, and you're just a teacher put on their path in their day to teach them.
100%. Yeah, I think it's hard, right? It's hard to always look at the world with good intentions, because there are some cruel things that happen in this world, unfortunately. But, we try our hardest to think that everyone is the best intentions.
Well, it doesn't serve us to think negative. I love the quote, a negative mind will never create a positive life. And so if you want your life to be positive and peaceful and joyful, then you got to make sure you switch your thoughts to something positive. So some people, I was on a podcast recently and they're like, do you think that's a little bit delusional? And I'm like, I will take delusion over negativity all the time, but I'm just filling in a blank and I get to choose what that blank looks like.
100%.
And so, right, we can either think the worst or we can think the best. And thinking the best helps me. Thinking the worst.
I was gonna say, if I wake up each day thinking that like this is gonna be the best day ever, or you wake up every day and say, oh, it's the worst day, like how do you think your day is gonna go if you think that way? Like it's not. So yeah, I think if I like looking at the world with rose-colored glasses sometimes, because I do think that we tell ourselves stories that sometimes are worse than they are. And I even when you're talking to, right, like others, like, okay, let's look at it from a different perspective. And that's what I try to help even with my own family. Like, okay, maybe that was the case, but if we look at it from a different perspective, like, do you think maybe it might have been a little different? So it's hard. It's hard to get ourselves out of those narratives. But I do think a lot of, even just in the survivor journey, is like, how can we look at this in a different way of like, okay, it could be worse, right? Or maybe this is just temporary. So I think we say that a lot, right? This is just temporary. A lot of healing is temporary, right? Like once we're healed, we're okay. But it does take a mindset shift, and it's hard work to get out of that.
Right. And I think for me, the four big things in my journey that I can like narrow it down to is positivity, gratitude, grace, and faith. And those in whatever forms, whatever I needed that day, if I make sure I'm feeding myself pieces of that every day, then I can stay stronger no matter what someone else does or says, what their opinions are. There's always going to be crappy opinions out there. There just are.
Yeah, that's fact of life.
No matter who we are or what we look like or don't look like, or whatever it is. And so we only have control over our own well-being. And when we can lead with love for ourselves and other people, then and set those boundaries from the people that just aren't our people. Like it's hard work, but it's not. It's not like a rocket science kind of thinking. You just have to be intentional about it. You have to wake up every day and know that this is my recipe for success, and I'm not going to let anybody else mess up my recipe.
And if someone is constantly bringing you down, right? And I think that was a very good point. Like I can surround myself with people that keep me in that positive headspace. And there are times where unfortunately you have to say goodbye to a relationship. It's not serving you, right? Like if this relationship has not served me, or I'm not getting a positive relationship here, then it is okay to terminate relationships, unfortunately.
Well, and I think there's a really creative way to look at that too. So boundaries can feel like walls, right? But they could actually be bridges to the right people, bridges to a better, healthier you, right? So if you look at them a little differently, I can't let the right people in if these wrong people are not right for me, right, are in the way. And so setting up boundaries actually helps me build bridges for where my life needs to go.
For better relationships. Yeah. I love that.
It's just a different way of looking at it, but it's then there's no guilt around it. It's like, just, you're not my person.
Yeah.
Good luck. Wish you the best. You're just not my person, right? That could go with not just people, but it could be boundaries with different experiences, like even knowing your triggers and knowing what is safe, right? What those boundaries are. My husband knows my boundaries with those triggers. And I think that's another conversation you have with the people around you.
I think it's a great point. I hear a lot like, I was triggered. I don't put myself in situations that are going to cause triggers, right? And so sometimes, and if you are in one, like there's a safe word that I need to get out, right? If I am not in a good spot. And I think that's a great point of like, okay, we can be triggered, but it's how we handle those situations. Right. Well, we're coming up. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, it's easier to like accept that, my triggers need boundaries, but my heart and spirit don't, because when you have boundaries with people who don't serve you, then it's much the same. It's like, I need to take care of myself holistically. Right.
Well, I know we are coming up on our time here. And before we close out, we want to know what's next for Danette and how we can get in touch with you. I know you did say you're a public speaker, so we have lots of folks that listen that may be interested in connecting with you. How can we do that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, my website is beautyfromashesspeaker.com. So everything is there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Danette Beauty from Ashes. So you put those together and you'll find me wherever. I also have a book that I'm so proud of. That is my journey of how I got from brokenness to really beauty from ashes, brokenness to the beauty stage. And that's Beauty from Ashes, transforming wounds into wisdom, scars into stars. So those are all the things that I have going on. I would love to connect. I'm also a coach, a mindset coach, and I would love to just put that out there, that I love working one-on-one with people who get, hung up on their scars and help them rise above them. So
all the things we talked about in today's podcast unknowingly. So very cool. Well, we always ask our guests 2 final questions. My final question this season is new. So tell us, what is one piece of advice or encouragement that you would want to give to someone who's navigating life after a burn injury? Like if you were to just pick one, what would it be?
I would say to have a spiritual practice every day. Whatever that is. For me, it's journaling. I love listening to certain music. I even light a candle, something I was very afraid of for a very long time. That's part of my spiritual practice. But develop and find a spiritual practice that works for you to help you stay at peace and at calm.
I love that.
I do too.
Mine. I do. When you said that, I'm like, I think like yoga is that for me, right? Like not like being able to sit in quiet time and have like connect with myself, right? And I think that's a big part of journaling too.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it is time for our final question, which is our Phoenix Partner question today, sponsored by Buses by the Beach, a group of VW van lovers who raise money for Phoenix Society. So their question is, what is one thing you hope listeners take away from your story today?
That your scars don't define you. That they're just a piece of your story. And I think we are intended to use our pain for purpose. And we just have to figure out what that means for you.
I love that. Finding purpose. I think that's a big part of your story.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we want to thank you for joining us. It has been a wonderful conversation. We will definitely stay in touch. And if you want to get to know Danette a little bit more, we'll put all of her information in our show notes.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll